too shy to become a mail order bride, until a rancher asked her to stay and speak her truth. Maria had always been a quiet girl. Even as a child, she preferred watching the world rather than being the center of attention. While other children ran and shouted through the streets of her small village, Maria would sit on the edge of the playground, her hands folded neatly in her lap, observing everything around her. She noticed the way the sunlight fell on the rooftops, the way the wind rustled through the trees, and the smiles and frowns of the people she passed by. To many, she seemed shy and unremarkable, someone who would fade into the background. But inside her heart, Maria had dreams that were vast and deep, dreams that could never be measured by the small village she called home. She often imagined a life that was different from the one she lived. A life where she could explore the world, meet new people, and find a companion who understood her. She wanted someone who could listen to her quietly, someone who could see the little details she noticed, and someone who would not rush her when words failed her. But even as she imagined this life, Maria felt trapped by her own shyness. Speaking up had always been hard for her. Asking questions, sharing opinions, or expressing her feelings often felt like trying to climb a mountain without any tools. Each word she spoke felt heavy and fragile, as if it could break under the weight of attention. Despite her fears, Maria's longing for connection never left her. She would often spend evenings sitting by her small window, watching the sun set behind the hills. She imagined a life beyond the familiar streets of her village, a life where she could belong, where her quiet nature was not a weakness but a strength. At night, she would write in her journal, her tiny handwriting spilling across pages with her secret dreams. She wrote about faraway lands she wanted to see, about conversations she hoped to have, and about the kind of love she longed to find, not loud or dramatic but gentle, understanding, and lasting. One day, while browsing the internet at the local library, Maria stumbled upon something that caught her attention. It was a website for mail-order brides. The idea made her heart race. She read stories of women who had left their homes to find love and companionship with men in other countries. Some stories were happy, some were sad, but all of them carried a sense of courage and hope. Maria felt a spark of possibility. Could she be brave enough to try something like that? Could she find a life beyond the small village that had always made her feel invisible? The thought was both exciting and terrifying. Maria knew that leaving her home meant stepping into the unknown. She would have to face strangers, travel to places she had never seen, and speak words she had never spoken aloud. The fear of rejection, of misunderstanding, or of failing filled her mind. Yet, something inside her whispered that this might be the path she needed. Perhaps this was the chance for her to finally be seen, to finally speak her thoughts and have them matter. For weeks, Maria hesitated. She would open the website, read letters from men seeking partners, and then close the page, her fingers trembling. She was afraid of being judged, afraid of making a mistake, and afraid that her quiet nature would make her seem unworthy. Every time she thought of writing back, doubt crept in. What if I am not enough? She would ask herself. What if I cannot speak well enough, or I seem too timid, or they do not understand me? These questions circled in her mind like storm clouds, heavy and relentless, but Maria's heart refused to let go of the hope she felt. Each day she returned to the website, reading more stories, learning about men who were looking for someone kind, someone gentle, someone honest. She realized that many of these men valued patience and understanding more than boldness and charm. Perhaps, she thought, there could be a place for her, a place where her quiet nature would not be a limitation but a gift. One evening, Maria sat in her small room, the orange glow of the setting sun spilling across the walls. She had printed a few letters from men who seemed sincere, men whose words were gentle and patient. Her hands shook as she held them, thinking about the decision she was about to make. Could she send a reply? Could she open a door to a life she had only imagined? She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in her life, she imagined herself being brave. The next day, Maria began writing a letter. She chose simple words, honest words, words that came directly from her heart. She wrote about herself, about her quiet nature, about her love for small joys like watching the sunrise, reading books, and listening to the wind through the trees. She wrote about her dreams of finding someone who could understand her without needing her to be loud or bold. She wrote slowly, carefully, pausing to think about each sentence, making sure it truly reflected who she was. When she finished, Maria read the letter aloud to herself. Her voice wavered, but there was a new feeling in it, something she had never felt before: courage. She folded the paper carefully and placed it in an envelope, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. For the first time, she felt like she was stepping toward something bigger than herself. Days passed, and Maria waited anxiously for a response. Each time the mail arrived, her hands shook as she opened it, hoping to see a reply. One day, a letter arrived that made her heart skip a beat. It was from a man named Daniel, a rancher who lived far away, in a place filled with wide-open spaces and rolling hills. His words were gentle and warm, and he wrote not just about himself, but about wanting to know Maria, to understand her, and to see her as she truly was. He spoke about his life on the ranch, about the quiet beauty of the land, and about the value of honesty and patience. Maria read the letter again and again. Her heart was full of a mixture of excitement and fear. She had imagined this moment many times, but now that it was real, it was overwhelming. Could she meet him in person? Could she leave her home and travel to a place she had never seen? She thought of the hills she had watched from her window, the streets she had always walked, and the small comforts of her life. Leaving it all behind was a daunting thought, yet the possibility of a life where she could speak her truth and be heard was more powerful than her fear. She spent many nights thinking about it. She imagined herself walking through the wide fields of the ranch, tending to animals, sharing quiet moments with someone who truly cared about her. She imagined herself sitting by a fire, speaking honestly about her feelings and dreams, and having them understood and accepted. The vision gave her courage, slowly replacing her fear with a small but growing hope. Finally, after weeks of hesitation, Maria made her decision. She would take a chance. She would travel to meet Daniel, the rancher who had written with kindness and patience, and she would try to step beyond the walls her shyness had built around her. It was a small step, but for Maria, it was monumental. It was the first time she had allowed herself to truly hope for something more, to truly believe that her quiet voice could matter in someone's life. As she packed her small bag, choosing only the essentials, Maria felt a mix of nerves and excitement. She knew the journey ahead would be challenging, that she would have to confront her fears and speak in ways she had never spoken before. But she also knew that this was her chance to change her life, to explore a world she had only dreamed of, and to find a connection that could help her grow in ways she never imagined. On the day of her departure, Maria stood at the edge of her village, taking one last look at the familiar streets and rooftops bathed in morning light. She felt a flutter of sadness for what she was leaving behind, but also a thrill of anticipation for what lay ahead. With a deep breath, she began her journey, holding tightly to the hope that, despite her shyness, she could find a place where her voice would be heard, her feelings understood, and her heart welcomed. Maria did not yet know what awaited her on the ranch, or how she would find the courage to speak her truth. But she knew one thing: she had taken the first, bravest step of her life, and nothing could take that away from her. Maria's journey to meet Daniel was filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The train ride alone seemed to stretch forever, the scenery outside changing from familiar fields and houses to vast stretches of countryside she had never seen. Each mile brought her closer to a world she had only imagined in her dreams, and her heart beat faster with both hope and fear. She held tightly to her small bag, and with every passing town, she wondered what kind of man Daniel would be, and if she could live up to the expectations she had built in her mind. When she finally arrived at the station nearest to Daniel's ranch, the sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink. The air smelled different, fresh and wide open, a smell that carried both freedom and uncertainty. Maria stepped down from the train, clutching her bag tightly, unsure where to look first. Then she saw him. Daniel stood a short distance away, a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Even from afar, he seemed calm and welcoming, a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts and fears swirling in Maria's mind. Daniel approached slowly, giving her space but closing the distance in a way that felt natural. "Maria?" he asked softly. She nodded, unable to speak at first. Her shyness seemed to swell, like an invisible wall rising inside her. Yet Daniel's presence was calming, and she could feel a sense of patience in the way he looked at her, as if he understood that speaking could be difficult for her. He took her bag and smiled again. "Welcome," he said. "I'm glad you're here." The ride from the station to the ranch was quiet but not uncomfortable. Daniel spoke in gentle sentences, sharing small details about the land, the animals, and the routines of ranch life. Maria listened carefully, her eyes wide with wonder. She had never seen so much open space. Rolling hills stretched as far as she could see, dotted with cattle grazing peacefully, and the air seemed cleaner and fresher than anything she had known. For the first time, Maria felt like she had stepped into a different world, a world that was alive and full of possibilities. When they arrived at the ranch, Maria was surprised by how much there was to see and do. The farmhouse was simple but welcoming, with a porch that overlooked the fields. Nearby, barns and stables held horses, cows, and other animals, and the sound of hooves on the dirt and the gentle lowing of cattle filled the air. Daniel introduced her to the ranch hands and workers, who greeted her politely but with curiosity. Maria felt her shyness rising again. Being the center of attention, even in a quiet way, was still uncomfortable for her. She smiled politely, nodded, and tried not to stumble over her words. In the first few days, Maria mostly observed. She watched Daniel as he went about his daily routines, feeding the animals, checking fences, and repairing equipment. She noticed how carefully he treated every creature on the ranch, how patiently he explained tasks to his workers, and how he seemed to find satisfaction in even the smallest things. It was different from anything she had ever seen. In her village, life had felt small and limited, with little room for independence or creativity. Here, she could feel life in a new and expansive way, but it also made her feel out of place. Daniel never pressured her. Instead, he gave her small tasks, ones she could manage without feeling overwhelmed. First, it was feeding the chickens, then gathering eggs, and later helping in the garden. Each task was simple but meaningful, and slowly, Maria began to feel a small sense of accomplishment. She realized that she could contribute in her own way, even if her shyness made her hesitant. Daniel noticed every small effort she made, and he offered quiet praise. "You did well today," he said one evening, after she helped move hay bales to the stables. "It may seem small, but it matters here." Despite her growing confidence, Maria still struggled with speaking her thoughts. Conversations were difficult, especially when she wanted to express herself fully. Daniel understood this and never pushed her to talk more than she could. Instead, he would ask gentle questions, giving her time to think before answering. "What do you enjoy most about your day?" he would ask. Or "what made you smile today?" Sometimes, Maria could only give small replies, but Daniel accepted them, and slowly she began to see that her voice, even if quiet, was valuable. Evenings were the hardest for Maria. After a long day of chores and exploration, she would sit alone on the porch, looking out over the vast fields. The quiet was both comforting and intimidating. She had spent so much of her life hiding her thoughts, and now that she was in a place where she could speak them, she felt unsure of how to start. She worried about saying the wrong thing, about seeming foolish, or about not being enough for Daniel. These worries kept her awake some nights, her hands fidgeting with the edges of her blanket as she thought of all the ways she might fail. But there were also moments of beauty that reminded her why she had come. Watching the sun rise over the hills, seeing the soft glow of fireflies in the evening, and hearing the quiet murmur of Daniel's voice as he worked around the ranch, it all made her feel a sense of peace she had never known. Slowly, she began to understand that life on the ranch was not about being loud or bold, but about being present, patient, and true to oneself. These realizations were small at first, but they grew stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, Daniel asked Maria if she wanted to ride a horse. Maria's heart raced at the idea. She had never been on a horse before, and the thought of balancing herself while riding across the open fields was terrifying. But Daniel guided her patiently, showing her how to mount the horse and hold the reins. At first, she was stiff and nervous, gripping tightly, but as the horse walked slowly through the fields, Maria felt a sense of freedom she had never experienced. The wind brushed against her face, and for the first time she laughed freely, a sound she had almost forgotten. Daniel smiled, noticing the change, and she realized that small victories could lead to great confidence. Meals were another challenge. Maria's hands would shake slightly when serving food or pouring drinks, and her words stumbled when she tried to engage in small talk. Yet, Daniel never made her feel awkward. He shared stories of his childhood, of the ranch, and of the challenges he had faced, and in return, he encouraged Maria to share little pieces of her life. Over time, she began to tell him about her village, her family, and even some of her dreams. The words were slow and careful, but they were hers. Daniel listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he wanted to understand, not judge. Slowly, a pattern began to form. Maria learned the rhythms of ranch life, the satisfaction of completing small tasks, and the joy of being part of a community that respected her efforts. She began to understand that her shyness did not make her weak. It was simply part of who she was. Daniel treated her with patience and kindness, showing her that connection and understanding could grow even in silence, and that sometimes words were less important than presence, trust, and empathy. By the end of her first month, Maria felt a change within herself. She was still shy, still careful with her words, but she no longer felt invisible. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it, step by step. Each task she completed, each small conversation she had, and each moment of quiet observation brought her closer to the person she wanted to become, a woman who could live fully, speak honestly, and find connection in a world that had once seemed too vast and intimidating. One evening, as they watched the sunset together, Daniel turned to her and said softly, "I see you, Maria. I see who you are, and I want you to be yourself here. You don't have to pretend or change. Just speak your truth, even if it's quiet at first." Maria's heart swelled. For the first time, she felt truly seen. It was a simple sentence, but it carried the weight of months of worry, fear, and self-doubt. She realized that this ranch, this life, and this man were offering her more than companionship. They were offering her a chance to discover her own strength and to speak her truth in her own time. By the time the first month ended, Maria felt a cautious optimism. She was far from fully confident, but she was learning that courage could be quiet, and that trust could grow slowly. Daniel's patience, the rhythm of ranch life, and the beauty of the open fields were teaching her lessons she had never imagined. She was beginning to believe that her shyness did not define her limitations, but rather, it could guide her toward meaningful connection and a life filled with purpose and understanding. And so Maria stayed, continuing to take small steps each day, feeding the animals, helping with chores, riding horses, and most importantly, slowly opening her heart to a life she had once only dreamed of. Each day was a mixture of challenge and discovery, and each small victory strengthened her belief that she could not only survive in this new world but thrive in it. Life on the ranch became Maria's new world, full of routines, challenges, and small triumphs. Each day brought something different. Sometimes it was the simple satisfaction of feeding the chickens and gathering eggs in the early morning. Other times it was helping with the cows or learning how to mend fences. Maria quickly realized that life on a ranch was far more demanding than she had imagined. The days were long, and every task required patience, attention, and careful effort. Yet within the hard work, there was also beauty. She loved the way the sun rose over the fields, how the light reflected on the animals' coats, and how the wind carried the smells of hay, grass, and soil. At first, Maria felt awkward in her new role. Even simple chores made her anxious because she feared doing them incorrectly. She worried that Daniel or the ranch hands would notice her mistakes and think she was incapable. The first time she tried to milk a cow, her hands shook so much that milk spilled onto the barn floor. She wanted to hide, embarrassed that she had made such a simple mistake. But Daniel was patient. "Take your time," he said gently. "It doesn't have to be perfect. You're learning, and that's what matters." His encouragement eased her nerves, and over the next few weeks, she learned the correct technique. Slowly, she gained confidence, discovering that mistakes were not failures, they were lessons. Maria also began to observe the rhythm of ranch life. The mornings were always busy, filled with chores and animal care. By midday, there was a quiet pause, a time for rest and meals. Afternoons often involved maintenance, repairing fences, checking water troughs, or moving animals to new pastures. Evenings were a time to unwind, sometimes with simple walks, conversations by the fire, or moments of quiet reflection. Maria liked this rhythm, the way each day had structure, purpose, and meaning. It gave her a sense of order she had never known in her life in the village. Yet, despite her growing confidence in practical tasks, Maria still struggled with communication. Speaking her thoughts aloud remained a challenge. Simple conversations felt like mountains to climb, and she often wished she could retreat into silence. But Daniel understood this struggle. He never pressured her or made her feel rushed. Instead, he asked gentle questions, gave her time to answer, and accepted her words no matter how small. "It's okay if you take a moment," he would say. "I'm listening, and I want to understand you." This patience slowly helped Maria feel more comfortable expressing herself, even if only a little at a time. One day, Daniel asked Maria to help with a larger task, rounding up a group of cattle from one pasture to another. Maria's heart raced at the idea. It was far more complicated than anything she had done before. She worried about making mistakes, worrying that the animals might scatter or that she might slow Daniel down. But he guided her carefully, explaining each step and demonstrating the process first. As they worked together, Maria found herself learning quickly. She discovered that she could be precise, careful, and strong, even in tasks she had never imagined handling. By the end of the day, she felt a quiet pride in her accomplishment. Life on the ranch also taught Maria about connection, not just with people, but with animals and the land itself. She noticed how Daniel treated every creature with respect. Horses were handled gently, cows were guided without force, and even the smallest chickens received care. Maria began to understand that patience, observation, and kindness could make a world of difference. She started to notice patterns, the way the animals responded to voice and touch, how the wind signaled weather changes, and how the land needed careful attention to stay productive. This understanding gave her a new sense of purpose. Evenings were the hardest part of the day for Maria. After long hours of physical work, the quiet of the ranch felt overwhelming at first. She would sit on the porch, listening to the sounds of crickets, the distant lowing of cows, and the rustling of trees in the wind. Sometimes she felt small and alone in the vastness around her. Her shyness made it difficult to start conversations with Daniel or the ranch hands, and she often worried that she was holding back too much of herself. But she also began to notice something important. Quiet moments were not always empty. In the silence, she could think, observe, and reflect. She realized that being quiet did not mean being invisible. It meant that she could notice things others might miss and understand them in her own way. Gradually, Maria began to open up more. She shared small stories from her childhood, spoke about her family and village, and even talked about her dreams and fears. Each time she spoke, Daniel listened carefully, asking questions that showed he truly wanted to understand her. "Tell me more about that," he would say, encouraging her to elaborate without forcing her. Maria realized that connection was built slowly, not rushed, and that honesty mattered more than words spoken quickly or loudly. This understanding helped her feel more confident in herself. The ranch also offered moments of joy and discovery. Maria loved riding horses, even though it had been frightening at first. She enjoyed the physical challenge and the sense of freedom it gave her. She loved learning new skills, whether it was repairing fences, handling animals, or planting vegetables. She even discovered a talent for storytelling. At night, she would tell Daniel little stories about her day, her observations, or memories from her village. He would listen intently, sometimes laughing, sometimes reflecting quietly, but always showing respect for her words. Friendship slowly grew between Maria and the ranch hands as well. At first, they had been polite but distant, unsure of how to interact with a quiet newcomer. But as Maria proved herself through hard work and patience, they began to include her in small conversations and share jokes. Maria learned to laugh with them, to enjoy the camaraderie that came from shared work and shared challenges. She realized that even though she had been shy her whole life, she could still form connections if she allowed herself to step forward, even in small ways. One afternoon, Maria experienced a moment that reminded her of how far she had come. Daniel asked her to help guide a group of young horses to a new field. At first, her hands shook, and she felt unsure of what to do. But as she focused, followed Daniel's instructions, and paid attention to the animals, she found herself moving confidently, anticipating the horses' movements and guiding them safely to the new pasture. Daniel smiled, giving her a quiet nod of approval. Maria felt a warm sense of pride. She realized that her shyness had not stopped her from learning, growing, or achieving something meaningful. The nights were often reflective. Maria would sit by the fire, thinking about her journey so far. She remembered the fear she had felt when deciding to leave her village, the anxiety of meeting Daniel, and the worry of fitting into ranch life. Now, after weeks of working, learning, and adjusting, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She was still shy and some fears remained, but she had proven to herself that she could adapt, learn, and thrive in a world far different from the one she had known. Through all of this, Daniel remained a steady presence. He never pressured her to be more outgoing or to speak more than she was comfortable with. Instead, he guided her gently, supported her learning, and gave her space to find her own rhythm. Maria realized that true support was not about changing someone, but about allowing them to grow at their own pace. His patience gave her the confidence to face challenges she would have once avoided, and his encouragement helped her see her own strength. By the end of the third month, Maria felt more at home than she had ever imagined possible. She had learned the daily routines of the ranch, discovered new skills, formed friendships, and begun to find her voice in small but meaningful ways. She was still shy, still careful with her words, but she no longer felt invisible or incapable. She had learned that courage did not always roar. Sometimes it whispered, appearing in quiet moments, careful steps, and small achievements. Maria realized that her life on the ranch was teaching her more than just practical skills. She was learning patience, resilience, observation, and the value of honesty. She was learning that connection was built slowly, and that being true to herself mattered more than trying to impress or perform. These lessons were shaping her into a woman who could not only survive in a new world but thrive in it, slowly discovering her own strength and voice. The ranch had become more than just a place to live. It was a place of learning, growth, and quiet transformation. Maria knew that challenges would continue, that moments of fear or doubt would return, and that stepping forward would not always be easy. But she also knew that she was no longer the same timid girl who had arrived weeks ago. She was stronger, wiser, and more capable of facing the unknown. And with Daniel's steady guidance and the beauty of the open land around her, Maria began to see a future where her shyness did not limit her, but shaped her into someone thoughtful, careful, and truly remarkable. Maria had been on the ranch for several months now, and life had become both familiar and challenging in ways she never expected. Each day brought new tasks, new lessons, and small victories that slowly built her confidence. Yet, despite all the progress she had made, there remained one challenge she had not yet faced: speaking her deepest thoughts and feelings. Her shyness had always been a barrier, keeping her from fully opening her heart to others. But she sensed that something important was waiting for her if she could only summon the courage to speak her truth. It was a warm evening when Daniel suggested they sit by the fire outside the farmhouse. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink, orange, and violet. The fire crackled gently, sending small sparks into the cool night air. Maria watched the flames dance, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. Daniel sat beside her, calm and patient as always, his presence steadying her even when her thoughts raced. "Maria," Daniel said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "I want to know how you feel about all of this, about the ranch, about your life here, and about yourself. I want you to speak honestly. You don't have to be perfect, just speak your truth." Maria's heart pounded. She had thought about this moment countless times, but now that it had arrived, it felt terrifying. Speaking honestly had always been difficult for her, and fear made her hands tremble and her voice quiver. She worried that her words would seem foolish, that she might stumble, or that she might reveal weaknesses that Daniel would not understand. But looking into his eyes, she saw patience, understanding, and a deep kindness that gave her courage she had never felt before. Taking a deep breath, Maria began to speak. At first her words were small, almost whispered. She talked about her village, her childhood, and the quiet life she had always known. She spoke of her shyness, her fears, and the moments when she had felt invisible. As she spoke, Daniel listened intently, never interrupting, never judging. His eyes encouraged her to continue, and slowly her voice grew stronger. She described the loneliness she had felt, the dreams she had kept hidden, and the longing she had for a life where she could belong and be understood. As the minutes passed, Maria felt a strange mix of relief and vulnerability. Speaking these words aloud made them real in a way that journaling or thinking could never do. She realized that sharing her feelings did not make her weak, it made her brave. She spoke of her hopes for the future, her desire to grow, and her wish to find love that was patient, kind, and understanding. She even shared moments of doubt and fear, moments she had never told anyone before. The firelight flickered across her face, highlighting the sincerity in her eyes, and for the first time she felt completely seen. Daniel responded not with words of advice or criticism, but with quiet support. "Thank you for sharing this with me, Maria," he said. "I hear you. I see you, and I want you to know that it's okay to feel all of these things. Your shyness doesn't make you less. It makes you who you are, and I admire that." Hearing this, Maria felt a wave of emotion. She had spent so much of her life hiding, so much of her energy worrying about how others might perceive her. And now, for the first time, she felt acceptance, not because she had changed, but because she had been true to herself. The realization was powerful, and tears welled up in her eyes. She smiled through them, feeling lighter than she had in years, as if a weight she didn't even know she carried had been lifted. After that evening, Maria noticed a change within herself. She no longer felt the need to retreat entirely into silence. She began to speak more often, sharing her thoughts and observations with Daniel and even the ranch hands. Conversations were still careful and deliberate, but they were meaningful. She realized that her voice had value and that honesty could create deeper connections than any performance or act could. Each time she spoke, she felt more confident, more capable of navigating a world she had once found intimidating. Daniel continued to encourage her growth without pressure. He introduced her to new tasks that required her to take initiative, such as planning parts of the daily work or guiding the younger workers in small chores. Maria discovered that she could lead without being loud or forceful. Her gentle approach, careful observation, and thoughtfulness made her a reliable and respected presence on the ranch. This realization gave her pride and reinforced the lessons she had begun to learn about patience, courage, and self-worth. The ranch also became a place for reflection and personal discovery. Maria spent mornings walking through the fields, watching the sun rise, and listening to the quiet of nature. These moments allowed her to think deeply about her past, her choices, and the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the fear she had felt when deciding to leave her village, the nervous anticipation of meeting Daniel, and the uncertainty of fitting into a completely new world. Each reflection reminded her of her own bravery, and she began to see herself as someone capable of growth, love, and resilience. One particularly memorable afternoon, Daniel invited Maria to help him sort a herd of horses that had recently returned from grazing. It was a complicated task, requiring focus, coordination, and confidence. Maria's first instinct was to hesitate, worried she might make a mistake, but Daniel's calm guidance reminded her of the lessons she had learned. She stepped forward, carefully following instructions, and gradually realized that she was capable of more than she had ever believed. By the end of the task, Daniel smiled at her proudly, and Maria felt a quiet sense of triumph. She understood that courage was not always a grand gesture. It could be found in small acts, careful attention, and the willingness to try despite fear. Evenings after such tasks became moments of reflection. Maria and Daniel often sat together, discussing the day, sharing observations, and simply enjoying each other's presence. Maria learned that trust and intimacy could grow through quiet moments, through shared effort, and through honesty. She discovered that speaking her truth did not have to be dramatic or loud. It could be simple, steady, and meaningful. These realizations shaped her growing confidence and her understanding of what real connection could be. Through all of this, Maria began to see that her shyness was not a limitation. It had been a part of her life, yes, but it had also given her the ability to observe, reflect, and understand deeply. She noticed details that others overlooked, understood emotions with sensitivity, and approached situations thoughtfully. By embracing her true self, she discovered strengths she had never recognized. Daniel's encouragement and the environment of the ranch helped her cultivate these strengths, teaching her that growth often comes slowly, through patience, practice, and trust. As weeks turned into months, Maria's voice continued to grow stronger. She shared her feelings, dreams, and ideas with Daniel regularly, sometimes hesitating, sometimes stumbling, but always speaking honestly. Each conversation strengthened the bond between them and reinforced her belief in herself. She realized that speaking her truth did not mean losing control or exposing weakness. It meant gaining freedom, connection, and confidence. By the end of this period, Maria had transformed in ways she could barely have imagined when she first arrived at the ranch. She had faced her fears, stepped into the unknown, and found the courage to express herself. She had learned that patience, honesty, and trust could create deep and meaningful connections, and she had begun to see herself as someone capable of love, respect, and contribution. The ranch, with its wide fields, animals, and quiet rhythms, had become not just a place to live, but a place of personal growth and discovery. Maria now approached each day with a quiet confidence. She understood that life would continue to bring challenges, moments of doubt, and situations that required courage. But she also knew that she had the strength to face them, the patience to navigate them, and the honesty to speak her truth even when it felt difficult. For Maria, speaking her truth was not just about words. It was about embracing herself fully, trusting in her abilities, and connecting deeply with the world around her. And so Maria continued her journey on the ranch, speaking more freely, participating fully, and discovering that her shy, quiet nature could coexist with courage, strength, and connection. She realized that the world did not require her to be bold or loud. It required her to be authentic, patient, and brave in her own way. This understanding became the foundation of her growing confidence and the key to the meaningful life she was building with Daniel. Life on the ranch had become Maria's new normal, yet it was far from ordinary. Each day brought routine tasks, challenges, and moments of quiet discovery, but it was also filled with small joys and meaningful connections that made her feel alive in ways she had never known. By now, Maria had grown stronger, braver, and more confident. Her shyness was still a part of her, but it no longer held her back. She had learned that courage did not mean being loud or bold. It meant speaking honestly, trying new things, and trusting herself and others. Maria woke up early most mornings, the first light of dawn spilling over the rolling hills. She would stretch and step outside, taking a deep breath of the fresh, open air. The smell of grass, soil, and animals was comforting, and the quiet rhythm of the ranch made her feel connected to the world around her. She often watched the cattle grazing, listened to the lowing of cows and the chirping of birds, and felt a sense of peace she had never experienced in her village. These moments of calm reflection had become an important part of her life, grounding her and preparing her for the day ahead. Her days were busy, but she welcomed the work. She fed the animals, helped with chores, and tended to the garden, sometimes guiding younger workers in small tasks. Each activity taught her something new, whether it was practical skills, patience, or understanding the needs of the land and animals. She realized that every small effort mattered and that her contributions, though quiet, were valuable. This awareness gave her a sense of purpose and pride she had never felt before. Even though she had grown confident in her tasks, Maria still had moments of doubt. Sometimes she worried that her shyness might prevent her from fully participating in conversations or making meaningful connections. But those moments were now shorter and less frequent. She remembered the evenings spent by the fire with Daniel when she had first spoken her truth. That night had been a turning point, teaching her that honesty and openness, even in small doses, could create connection and trust. Each day after that, she practiced being herself, slowly building her confidence and strengthening her relationships. Maria and Daniel had developed a rhythm together. Their mornings often involved working side by side, whether feeding the animals, fixing fences, or moving cattle to new pastures. Their afternoons sometimes included quiet walks across the fields, exploring the land or sharing stories. And evenings were often spent by the fire, reflecting on the day, discussing plans for the future, or simply enjoying the peaceful sounds of the ranch. Through these shared moments, Maria felt a deep sense of partnership with Daniel, a bond built on patience, understanding, and respect. One day, Daniel asked Maria to help plan a larger part of the ranch's daily routine, including managing the schedule for workers and organizing the care of the animals. At first, she felt nervous, worried that she might make mistakes or that her decisions would be questioned. But Daniel encouraged her gently, reminding her that she had learned enough to contribute meaningfully. She took the responsibility seriously, carefully thinking through each task, asking questions when needed, and making decisions with thoughtfulness. By the end of the day, everything had gone smoothly, and Daniel praised her efforts. Maria felt a quiet pride that filled her heart with confidence. Through her growing confidence, Maria also discovered the joys of simple moments. She loved riding horses across the fields, feeling the wind on her face and the power of the animal beneath her. She enjoyed tending the garden, watching plants grow from tiny seeds into vibrant vegetables. She delighted in cooking meals, sharing stories with the ranch hands, and observing the natural beauty around her. Even small successes, like calming a frightened animal or helping a young worker complete a task, gave her a sense of accomplishment she had never imagined. Perhaps the most important change, however, was within her heart. Maria had learned to trust herself, to believe in her abilities, and to embrace her shyness as a part of her identity rather than a limitation. She had learned that her quiet nature allowed her to notice details, understand emotions deeply, and approach life with careful thought. And most importantly, she had learned that she could form meaningful connections, speak honestly, and be loved for who she truly was. One evening, as the sky turned shades of gold and purple, Maria and Daniel sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills. Maria felt a deep sense of contentment. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the quiet girl in a small village, unsure of her place in the world, to the woman who now had skills, confidence, and the ability to speak her truth. She thought about the fears she had faced, the risks she had taken, and the lessons she had learned about patience, courage, and honesty. Daniel turned to her and spoke gently. "You've grown so much, Maria. I see your strength, your kindness, and your wisdom. You've embraced yourself fully, and it's a joy to witness." Maria smiled, feeling warmth and gratitude in her chest. "I never thought I could be like this," she admitted softly. "I was so afraid at first, afraid of leaving my home, afraid of meeting you, afraid of failing. But now I feel like I've found a place where I belong, where I can be myself." Daniel nodded. "And that's exactly what I wanted you to find here. Not just a new life, but a life where you could grow, speak your truth, and be seen for who you are. You didn't have to change who you are, Maria. You just needed to be yourself, and look how far you've come." Her heart swelled with emotion. Maria realized that this journey had been about more than moving to a new place or learning new skills. It had been about discovering herself, finding her voice, and embracing her quiet courage. She understood now that strength came in many forms. It could be gentle, patient, and reflective, and it could grow through small, consistent efforts over time. Over the following months, Maria continued to flourish. She became an integral part of the ranch, respected by the workers and trusted by Daniel. She guided tasks, offered insights, and even taught younger workers the patience and observation she had learned. Her relationships grew deeper, not because she was loud or forceful, but because she was authentic, reliable, and caring. She had learned that trust and respect were earned through consistency, kindness, and honesty, and she embodied these values in everything she did. Maria's personal growth also strengthened her bond with Daniel. They shared more than tasks and routines. They shared ideas, dreams, and quiet reflections. Daniel encouraged her to express herself in all areas of life, from planning activities on the ranch to sharing her thoughts about the future. Their connection was rooted in mutual respect, patience, and understanding, creating a partnership that felt balanced and nurturing. Maria had never imagined that such a deep connection was possible, but she now knew that it could exist when honesty and patience guided the relationship. One day, as Maria walked across the fields, she noticed how far she had come. The wide-open land that had once seemed intimidating now felt like home. The routine she had feared had become familiar and satisfying. Her confidence in her abilities had grown, and her voice, once timid and hesitant, was now heard and respected. She understood that courage was not always visible. It could be quiet, patient, and enduring. And she realized that her shyness had not been a weakness. It had been part of the journey that led her to this place of strength and fulfillment. By the end of her first year on the ranch, Maria felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had faced fears she never imagined confronting, learned new skills, formed meaningful connections, and discovered her inner strength. She had become a woman capable of love, trust, and courage, not the loud kind of courage, but the steady, honest, and resilient kind that grows over time. She had found a life where she belonged, where her voice mattered, and where her quiet nature was appreciated rather than judged. Maria often thought back to the moment she first received Daniel's letter. She remembered the fear, the hesitation, and the uncertainty. Looking at her life now, she realized how far she had come, not just geographically, but emotionally and spiritually. She had taken a leap into the unknown, faced challenges with courage, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. She had found a partner who respected and nurtured her, a home that gave her purpose, and a sense of self she had never known before. Even as she looked toward the future, Maria knew that life would continue to present challenges. There would be difficult days, tasks that tested her patience, and moments of doubt. But she also knew that she now had the skills, the courage, and the understanding to navigate them. She had discovered that speaking her truth, embracing her strengths, and trusting herself were the keys to a fulfilling and meaningful life. And with Daniel by her side, supporting and encouraging her, she knew she could face whatever came next with confidence and grace. Maria had arrived on the ranch as a shy, uncertain girl, unsure of her place in the world. She was leaving the girl she once was behind, replaced by a woman who had discovered her strength, her voice, and her capacity for love. Her journey had been long and sometimes frightening, but it had brought her to a place of deep fulfillment. She had learned that true courage comes from being yourself, facing your fears, and speaking your truth, no matter how quietly it begins. As she watched the sunset over the rolling fields, Maria felt a profound sense of peace. She had found more than love on the ranch, she had found herself. And in that discovery, she realized that the life she had always dreamed of was not defined by adventure or excitement alone, but by honesty, connection, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing and trusting yourself. Maria smiled softly to herself, feeling a warmth in her heart she had never known. The journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever lay ahead. She had learned to embrace her shyness, speak her truth, and live fully in the world around her. And in that moment, Maria knew that she was finally home.